And so I would say for me, the main thing I have learned is that the people who start as our, I would say, biggest haters are usually the one actually who turn out to be our main cheerleaders, because these are the people who have the strongest emotions about it.
Welcome back to the Shay Davis interview. I'm Brendan Davis, and first, a programming note. Susie will be joining us again very soon in the upcoming weeks, not even months. She will be able to join me on camera and hopefully use some of these interviews together, as well as producing other videos from Susie World and her perspective. But today, I'm really pleased to welcome Ben and Nur to the channel. Ben and Nur are the co-founders of Copycat Cafe, which is an app that I did a review on. I'll tell the short little backstory here before I shut up and let them talk. I did a review of this app, and it was a detailed walkthrough, and it captured what I really liked, what I didn't love so much, and my thoughts in between. And it was not sponsored, just like this video is not sponsored. It was my honest opinion. I was surprised to receive an email from Ben on he and Nur's behalf that was basically saying, thank you so much for doing this. It's really helpful as we continue to develop. And he addressed point by point the main things that I said that were sort of critiques or questions about development. So I was really impressed by that and agreed that I would revisit it at a later date and do a follow-up. And I decided we'd do that by way of actually just getting them here on the channel and talking to them. And they have a really interesting story as well. So I think everybody's going to enjoy it. So Ben, Nur, how are you doing today?
Good. Very good. Yeah, thanks for having us. I remember when I wrote you, I was very impressed by your review and how detailed it was. I don't remember if you found it or I found it.
I found it.
Yeah, you found it. And then we both sat down and watched the entire thing and took notes.
Yeah, it was really interesting to hear your perspective, because it was the first time someone had actually reviewed it. Yeah. And we really learned a lot from it, I think.
What were some of the things that made you decide to start Copycat Cafe? And I know that it's an evolution of an earlier app. You know, you might want to answer this by starting with, how did you two meet? I mean, what are your backgrounds in the first place that led you to where we are today?
I actually started Copycat Cafe 13 years ago, something like that. Initially, it was just a blog called French Together, and I was still at university, and I figured, I'm French, I'm living abroad. I was actually teaching French in South Korea as part of a volunteer program. And so I figured I would just, have a blog where I just give advice to people on how to learn French in a way that's much more conversational, not too grammar focused. And so, I started this blog. Then I moved to Germany, which is actually when I met Nur. I was actually looking for a language exchange partner who could teach me German. And so we met, and we never spoke any German or French, actually. We only spoke English. So that was not very successful from a linguistic point of view.
Yeah, it was just so much easier to just talk, and it was so natural for us to talk. So we kept doing that and never really studied the language. But this is how we became best friends. At first, you had already started it, and I was just a student, 19 or something, and we stayed best friends for a long time, actually, and we didn't work together for a while. It was just him doing everything, technical work, marketing, while I was studying, and then later on he moved to London. I stayed in Germany. And I had so many interests, so it was hard for me to really find out what I actually want to do in my life. I was studying philosophy, doing my bachelor's and master's, and actually wanted to go into academia because I always found it very fascinating. I had a scholarship, but then I decided against it. Then I knew I loved writing, so I was thinking of becoming a journalist or something like this, and somehow I stumbled into communication. Corporate communication. So I was doing something that's quite similar to the work I'm doing now. And I think it all just came together because more than a decade later, we actually started to date. We were still always best friends and always kept in touch. And I was growing more and more unhappy in my corporate job because I didn't really see a lot of opportunities to progress. I had a manager that was not really supportive. And then one day, Ben just had the idea of basically, telling me, why don't you just quit your job? You already have like really valuable experience. You can do marketing. And that frees up my time to do the technical work. And it was really scary, but I did it end of October, actually. So quite not that long ago. And since then we're doing it all together.
So Ben, you, besides being a French person and having a background as a language teacher, do you have a development, like a web development skill set as well? Or did you learn that in order to make this app, or how did you actually start building an app?
So actually, I learned how to code during the pandemic. Because the business was not doing that well. I mean, it was doing okay, just was it had kind of flatlined and it was not really growing, and I was not really inspired anymore. And I was like, okay, we are in lockdown, there is nothing to do. I will just learn how to code and make this app that I thought for years I should make. And so I just learned by doing it, essentially.
So a lot of these notes I gave you were very much things that meant you had to address, the code, right? It wasn't so much critiquing the language. It was like this function, I feel like this could be improved, etc. So every time you get a note or have a thought of your own for something like that, do you have to stop and, okay, how do I do that? Do you have to go learn that, or are you pretty good with it now?
Doing the thing technically is not too challenging. The main challenging part is first figuring out what's worth building and what's not. Also, we get a lot of feedbacks of all sorts, and one of the hardest things is actually figuring out, is this something we should really change, or is this just one person, experience? Because obviously, if we listen to everyone's feedback, we just end up going in all kinds of direction. Also, we had just rebranded the app, I think, actually, when you tried it. Actually, before it was an app, it was an ebook. Basically, all you could do was play a conversation, and that's it. And so I had turned that into a web app. And then recently, when we rebranded to Copycat Cafe, I kind of simplified the lesson flow a lot. Initially, it was like 6 different steps in one lesson, which people found, some people loved it. Like people who are, really into languages, are kind of like hardcore users, loved it. But most people found it too overwhelming. So I tried to simplify this. And so now we have Watch, Copy, Chat. And the problem with the new approach, the problem initially was that if you add AI into your app, you end up with a lot of moving parts that are not very predictable. Meaning, you have an AI chat, you always get a different result. And so the difficulty was how to help people learn to speak French or Spanish in, a realistic way. It's like you're in Paris, you go in the street, you never know how people will respond to you. And so we wanted to recreate this in a safe environment. The difficulty was there were so many different variables that it felt very difficult to just control it all in a way that, was like it was basically hard to have a good mix of challenges, but also predictability at the same time. The main challenge has just been trying to make everything work together, essentially.
What problem would you say you're trying to solve that you didn't see in other apps? What is something that you feel you're doing different, differently and better than some of the other apps out there?
Maybe one thing, obviously our focus is a lot on speaking and learning to have these natural conversations. But I think something that I've noticed while looking at some competitor apps, there are actually a lot of AI apps out there right now, where you can talk a lot and you get some replies back, but a lot of them don't seem to have a curriculum. And I think we try to have sort of the perfect combination of still offering people a structure and curriculum, especially beginners, so that they can learn a language, but then also having a free chat and AI. I don't know if...
I think the problem is that many apps, many AI apps and, new apps, they essentially open, you start with a a chat with AI immediately. And I think that can work if you are pretty good in the language and you can already, go around the city, speak to people. Then you can learn from just talking to AI. But if you're at a more beginner or even intermediate level, you just find yourself in front of an AI and you're like, what do I say?
Yeah.
I will just summarize quickly for anyone who is not super familiar with Copycat Cafe, but essentially we have 200 lessons, and each lesson is basically an everyday conversation. You start by listening to the conversation before you even see any of the words. And so the goal of that step is to get you to train your ears and also to prevent one mistake that I think a lot of apps and methods do, which is that if you're American, they show you the French words and you read the French words before you listen to them. And the problem with that is that you will tend to read them with an American accent or with, whichever pronunciation tools you know. And so that can kind of corrupt your pronunciation in a way. And that's why for us, the first step is always you listen without reading so that your brain starts with the correct pronunciation immediately instead of starting with bad habits. And the second step after that is copy, where you copy what you heard. So you listen to a native speaker saying a phrase, then you try to pronounce it, and we'll have an AI that essentially scores how understandable your pronunciation is. And so I think compared to other apps, having these two steps before the chat helps you arrive in the chat and be a little less confused. And I say a little less because the chat is always difficult, especially at the beginning. So even with this preparation, you can still sometimes be a bit hesitant and not necessarily know what to say, which is something we're working on as well. But yeah, I would say compared to many AI apps, we prepare you better, essentially.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that is my honest opinion. Having used it, is that it seems that, I mean, I think that's a wise workflow. And I reviewed it again yesterday to kind of prepare for this talk today. As you said, if a native English speaker is reading it, we're going to automatically be filling in the blanks. We're going to be probably trying to pronounce it. I dove into your app to start testing some of these things. Part of what attracted me in the very first place to trying you out was that I felt like I had made the most progress in the previous language that I learned was Mandarin Chinese, and the Pimsleur method, very, very useful. And what was funny, when I first started visiting China and then later moved there, because I knew how to say the very basic hello, how are you doing, chit chat, where's this, I would like that. I knew how to say that with a really solid accent.
Yeah.
People would assume that I was much more capable than I was because my accent was good and I was saying the words properly, which is especially important. It's important in French, but it's in Chinese you could be saying something completely different if the accent's not exactly right.
Yeah.
Some of the voices are human, but some of them are AI.
But cloned, I guess. From
From all the Spanish voices are AI voices. From A1 to B1, initially we had 30 lessons by level, and these were all human voice actors. But now we have 50 per level. So it's quite likely you listen to some of them with AI actors, actually.
I will be spending more time in your app because I need to as well.
Yeah.
So I'll see if I can detect it. Ben, you already spoke about how you worked hard on basically the curriculum and getting the lessons to match the accepted levels. And I cheated and used my AI helpers to look at that. And ChatGPT and Claude both said from the sample that I was able to provide, these lessons do correspond very cleanly to like an accepted A1 or A2 or B1 or B2 level. So it looks like you did a really good job with that. I'm curious, what has been the biggest challenge building the company, and where do you see going from here? Where do you want to go from here with it?
Yeah, I think especially from a marketing perspective, for me at first, it was sort of a completely new area. I mean, I did work in communication, but I think doing marketing for a language learning app is still quite different, because previously I was in quite an international PR agency, working for different clients, healthcare companies, etc. And now I was much more directly responsible for a product, and also doing everything, marketing, but also PR. So I think in order to grow it, at first I really had to find out what sort of channels are actually worth it for me to pursue, and what channels maybe aren't that worth it. For example, right now I think we're both seeing that our blog is quite a good driver for traffic and also for trial sign-ups and for future growth of our company. So I've been investing a lot on updating articles, writing new articles. I think a lot of people neglect SEO nowadays, but it's quite worth it because we rank quite well for best French learning apps, best AI language learning apps. So that's one thing I think important for our growth. And we've also been leaning more heavily into affiliate marketing, which is also a completely new area for me. And contacting people like you who are doing content about French culture or Spanish culture, and many of them are already affiliates for other language learning apps, and they are quite happy if they like our product to promote it. And these sorts of things, we're also experimenting with ads way more. I think we want to try that. Yeah, it's a learning process for me, but I think all of these things, content, ads, affiliates, will help us to grow hopefully in the future from a marketing perspective at least.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say for me, one of the challenges actually, so we have a very opinionated view of how a language learning app should be, how it should teach and things like that. And sometimes this view kind of conflicts with what we know will make growth easier. Basically, still doing things the way we think they should be done, even though we know ideally if we wanted to grow faster, we should compromise. So that has been a challenge for me personally.
Being that you're French, I'm not surprised that you have a strong opinion about how it should be. But that's you should. This is your baby that you've created, and so I appreciate that I appreciated before we had even met by email that there was clearly a cohesive intellectual approach to how it should be structured. It was evident. I mean, that's. As I said in that review, I guess that's why you reached out, among other reasons, is, even though I had notes, I'm a film producer, I'm always going to have notes, but I liked it, and I think that if I had started with no knowledge, I would have liked it even better. A little bit of knowledge can be a dangerous thing in a lot of ways, and the fact that I have a little bit of knowledge and a small amount of functionality already, it's just tricky to calibrate, but that's more of a me issue. I think that, that every user's experience is different. What are some of the other sorts of feedback that you get from other people?
Yeah, maybe one thing that's surprising to me, you have more experience with that because he's been doing customer support for all of these years and I'm new to this. And it's, we get some really peculiar customers sometimes, and you have a really good amount of emotional intelligence to figure out what they want, because sometimes it's hard to decipher their emails. Some of them, I mean, a lot of them are really happy, but occasionally we get emails where they are really angry and are like, no, why did you change this? And it's really hard for me to understand what they actually mean. And I think over the years you have learned to read in between the lines.
One challenge I have learned developing the product is that what people say is not necessarily what they want. So if someone will tell you the content of your lessons is way too difficult, the French you teach is too difficult, sometimes it doesn't necessarily mean that the French itself is too difficult. Sometimes it's just the way you present it. And I have learned that sometimes you can take user feedback and do a very, very simple tweak, and the person will go from "this is horrible, I hate every second of it" to "this is amazing." And so I would say for me, the main thing I have learned is that the people who start as our, I would say, biggest haters are usually the one actually who turn out to be our main cheerleaders, because these are the people who have the strongest emotions about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's very easy, to read the feedback and to feel very defensive and attacked, because you're like, oh my God, this person, how dare they criticize us, And I learned actually that it really helps to basically slow down, think it through, and ask them, can you really walk me through what you were trying to do, what frustrated you? And a lot of time I find out that the solution at the end is completely different from what I thought. And sometimes the solution is not even changing the app, it's just literally adding one line of explanation that explain to the person why we do it this way. And then they're like, oh, actually, yeah, that makes sense.
My note about wanting sort of like a free-form experience, you may have added this and I overlooked it because I wasn't looking for it and I was focused on what I was doing. Maybe even adding in just a little note, within the lessons, chat is constrained to the lesson. If you want to just talk about any and everything, go to free chat and go crazy, and you can have a political discussion or maybe be a little saucy, whatever you want, and see. Because I kept trying to break basically the chat within the lesson, and it's like no.
Yeah.
C'est interdit.
I mean, the one funny thing about that is that I remember distinctly when I got your feedback. At the very same time, I had feedback in our support app that was basically saying the exact opposite, which is it lets me speak too freely. I wish it was more constrained. And so it's very difficult because you have to make it, you have to give freedom to the students. Like basically what I learned is that as a language learner, you want to feel empowered and like you have the freedom to learn as you want to learn, but you also want to feel guided.
Yeah.
And so these are two kind of tensions, and getting them right can be surprisingly difficult, actually.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So
everyone's not as subversive as I am.
Yeah, and following your feedback, one of the simple thing we did is we just renamed the lesson chat, and now it's called roleplay. And then the other chat was just called chat, and so people were like, there is lesson chat and chat, and it was very confusing. And now that it's actually called roleplay and free chat, we have way fewer people getting a bit confused.
Okay.
And so in this case, literally just changing the name made a lot of difference.
So I was surprised actually to see, Spanish available, and you have other plans. So what's next? Are you trying to are you aiming for Duolingo? Are you going to have Klingon at some point? Are you aiming for every language on the planet, or what's your strategy?
Elvish, maybe.
No, I think we'll be launching
Elvish.
Yeah, she wishes. But
Okay.
I think we'll probably launch German, Italian, and Portuguese next.
Bigger languages with more demand.
Yeah.
And then some others. I think we want to continue to basically be a multi-language app. Same approach.
I mean, I wish we could add, Mandarin, Cantonese, Japanese. The problem is that, with the totally different alphabets and everything, I think it would be way more work. And so for now, we want to focus on Latin languages.
Well, that's a good idea. I forget if it was that video or an overview, but that was my big complaint with I hated Rosetta Stone for trying to learn Mandarin. It was a million problems with that. But, as I understand, they basically, everyone sees the same pictures of the same people, the same settings. It's not localized. And it just wasn't natural, and especially as I actually learned some Chinese, because I had purchased the thing and I had it on my old computer in a storage unit somewhere, but I went back to it at a certain point after I had learned a little bit of Chinese, and I'm like, this is not how people speak. it's not even just it doesn't even seem textbook correct, What languages do both of you speak?
So I speak, I was born in Germany, But my parents are from Turkey originally, so I speak German as my native language, Turkish, but it's not perfect because as a child I mostly spoke German, English, French, but I forgot so much of it. I was quite good in high school in French, and now I'm actually also using Copycat Cafe to freshen up my French and also learn a bit of Spanish.
Yeah.
Okay, so Ben, what languages are in your personal portfolio?
So I'm a native French speaker, as you can probably tell from the accent. I also speak English, German. I used to speak a bit of Korean and Russian, but I forgot this mostly, and that's it. I should be learning Turkish, but I keep being distracted.
Yeah, to be able to talk to her parents.
Yeah. And yeah, if we move to Spain or Portugal, then I will improve. I actually understand Spanish. I just don't speak it.
So the bigger answer to the question of where do you want to be in 3 years, where would you like to see this project of yours in the market, in the world?
Basically, the way I see it is you have most people learning with Duolingo. And I have nothing against Duolingo, but I find it kind of not ideal if you want to actually speak the language and use it in real life. Personally, where I would like us to be in 3 years is seen as a Duolingo alternative for people who actually want to have conversations with humans.
And to offer like a lot of languages.
Yeah.
So really being established multi-language app. And I guess, we'll grow in this time, hopefully. But we can also stay true to our method.
What do you think the biggest advantage is? Give me your best marketing pitch for why people should try Copycat Cafe.
How we basically like to say it is learning a language does not have to be complicated, because when you were a baby, you just learned it by imitating or by listening to your parents. So why could you not just learn a language just like this, instead of focusing too much on grammar, too much on textbook exercises? Just use your baby brain basically to learn the language. And over time, your brain really gets used to all of these different phrases, even grammar. Your subconscious listens to you, and you will be able to speak really naturally and have everyday conversations.
I think we're just trying to cut out all the noise in language learning and letting people focus on what happens in real life when you find yourself in front of someone in a bistro or in a cafe or wherever in France. And suddenly you hear that person speak. So the first thing you want is, can I understand what they just said, even if they spoke very quickly? So that's what we help you with the watch step. Then the second part is, okay, now that they spoke, I have to say something. And not only do I have to remember what to say, I have to be able to say it with a pronunciation that's good enough for this person to understand us. So that's the copy part. And then once I have done that, I need to somehow manage a full conversation with everything that comes with this. And that's the chat part. And so I think for me, the idea is essentially, you don't need to do a ton of grammar exercises. You don't need to do drills. You don't need to, play games. You just need to listen, repeat, and speak. And that's what we help you do essentially.
Well, I think that approach is borne out, I know, academically, and I have seen it with my own daughter. We're doing that one parent, one language idea. And Susie tries, she mostly speaks to Jenny in Chinese. I obviously speak English. We both practice and speak a little bit of French. And then Jenny attends a French creche. She's in her second year at a French daycare, so she's immersed in French. And she understands all 3 languages and speaks to the degree she speaks, and she's starting to use slightly more complicated sentences. Well, it's really nice talking to both of you, and I'm going to have one more question here before we wrap up, but just as a reminder to anyone watching, again, this video isn't sponsored. I was really... I enjoyed using the app when I first tried it, and I was really impressed by Ben and Nur's follow-up and really genuinely caring about, taking the feedback to heart and following up with me saying, this is what we've done, we're working on this. And I just really appreciate that. And so I am glad to now, I guess this is our first affiliate link that we will have with the channel, I will put the affiliate link to sign up and try out Copycat Cafe here in the description. So if anyone's watching and you want to give this, kick the tires on this, follow our link and we'll earn a small commission if you sign up. But I believe there's a free trial, right? I think that's what I did.
Yes, there is a 7-day free trial.
There you go. So you can check it out. And if you're interested enough to sign up, please go ahead and use the affiliate link. And my last question to you both is, especially you're both multilingual. So you've learned a lot of languages, some naturally, some you've studied. If someone is frustrated learning a language, what is the best piece of advice, or what is one piece of advice you would give them?
One advice that I would give, because I've noticed my French is better when I do follow it. Don't be too ashamed to speak just because you might make some grammatical mistakes. It does not have to be perfect. Don't be too shy, because by really speaking, you become better over time.
Yeah, for me, the main advice would be don't underestimate how much you already know. Just because you feel lost when you're in front of someone doesn't actually mean you haven't already done a ton of work. The problem with language learning is that you can be 70% there and actually struggle with conversations because if only one part of the listening, speaking, pronouncing is bad, then the conversation breaks down. So my advice would be identify the part you are really struggling with, the part that's holding you back, and laser focus on that. Because I have met people from work who could say a lot. The problem is that nobody could understand their pronunciation. And after a few weeks of really focusing on improving their pronunciation, suddenly they could actually have conversations.
Well, I think that's great advice. I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today. And again, I'm very impressed.
For having us.
Yeah, I'm very impressed with what you're building, and glad to help support the mission. So thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.